Welcome to the Dig Endurance Podcast, where we are all about digging deep and discovering the power of emotional resilience. I'm Aaron, and I'm joined by my brother Sean.
As endurance athletes and business owners, we have learned a thing or two about facing and overcoming adversity. We are here to share inspiring stories from our guests that will help you to find that inner strength when you feel like you are running on empty.
Are you ready? Let's dig in. Welcome back to the Dig Endurance Podcast. Evan's here.
Yay.
Evan's here.
We've been waiting for this for weeks.
Yeah, we tried
Sure.
not one time, 2 times.
Yeah.
Evan denies it, but we did.
Yeah.
We tried
Busy
2
attorney life
times, but yeah,
excuses or something like that.
He's very busy, very busy.
Scott and Cade set the bar high too last week, so
I know,
hopefully you bring your A game today.
I'm a little apprehensive. We'll see what I can do.
Yep. So Evan is our brother-in-law, and he's married to our oldest sister, Lindsay. And Evan, how long have you had your law firm now?
I've had my own law firm for just about, what is it, we're in May? Oh, so 7 months or so.
7 months with the law firm you have now, right?
Yeah, like I said, so I opened my own law firm about 7 months ago. I've been practicing family law and civil litigation for 2.5 years. I graduated law school in 2020 in the spring. Was working with another small local firm here in town, and then an opportunity presented itself the end of last year to branch out on my own. And I think it's always kind of been the goal. I didn't think it would present itself as quickly as it did. We get just a couple years in, but it did, and talked about it with my wife and took the leap, and it's been a struggle. It's been challenging. It's been
always
fun.
a struggle. We talked last week. The timing is never perfect for starting your own business. You just got to kind of do it.
Yeah. He's got a great story. We're gonna hear it. He's gonna lay it all out on the table for us. Give us just a quick rundown. What's your community background here? What's your family life like? Just give us a couple minute spiel on where you're coming from and where you were raised and how.
Sure. So I was born in Arizona. Only lived there for a couple of years. My dad was finishing graduate school there, his master's, and we moved to Texas, a small town outside of Dallas. That's where I spent most of my childhood. Enjoyed my time there, and then we moved again for my dad's work here to Fresno just before 7th grade. So just before, like I said, if junior high wasn't difficult enough, why don't let's move 1,500 miles across the country and you don't know anybody, and then start junior high. So
but still maintain the Texas fan base, right?
A little bit, yeah. But yeah, so then we moved here when I was 12. Been here ever since. Mainly out kind of in Clovis, where my parents still live. I spent. Went to high school here locally. Did a little bit of time. I went to BYU in Utah for about a year and a half, and then finished up my education here at Fresno State. So I got, like I said, I've been married for, I should do the math, 13 years? 14 years.
I was like, this is live. You better have that date back.
14 years. In December, I've got 3 stepkids, Allie, Avery, and Sean. They're older. One of my stepdaughters has 2 children of her own, which makes me a grandpa, believe it or not.
Wait, you're a grandpa?
Yes.
How old are you?
Of this. I
know, I wanted to point that out to the listeners.
I'm 37.
37-year-old grandpa.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, and
Grandpa
then,
Evan.
yeah, and they're great. I love it. Little Wells and Scotty, we spent some time with them last week. It was fun. Then my stepson he'll be 19 on Sunday. Then I've got 2 little ones with my wife, with Lindsay. We have little Tucker, who's 6, and Tice, who is a little over a year and a half. So we've got the broad spectrum, but we love it. It's, like I said, it's a unique dynamic. Lindsay is the oldest of all your siblings, all 9, and so that spans a large period of time. And so we've, like I said, I think our family dynamic's a ton of fun.
So 2 kids.
That's cool.
3 stepkids, raising 2 kids, while Lindsay's oldest is raising her 2 kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Tice is an aunt, an 18-month-old aunt to her niece, who is just turned 3.
Nice.
Yeah.
That is so.
We are the American family.
And they're all cutie bugs.
American.
They are. It's a lot of fun. So
that's cool.
Yeah,
that is cool.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, if you guys want me to dive right in, starting from the family, being a stepdad when we got married was kind of an interesting challenge.
Yeah, I was going to say, it wasn't us. So you just gave us kind of the summary, but it obviously wasn't, no blended families. I mean, probably safe to say is obviously perfectly flowery. I mean, there were some bumps along the way. So tell us more about, you said how you moved to Fresno and whatnot, but meeting Lindsay and then, marrying her and then kind of from there, I guess dive more into that dynamic and just the challenges of, taking on a new family and then just going from there.
Yeah. We met in 2007, I think. I had been selling home security systems or installing them at one point, had come back to Fresno, and it's funny. So, I knew you guys growing up, through church and soccer and sports and things like that. And, Lindsay was married before, and she got married young, but young enough that by the time I kind of knew you guys, I didn't even know she existed. It's just kind of funny. I thought you were the oldest Tucker child.
That's funny.
Believe it or not.
I act like it. A lot of people think that, but
Sure.
Lindsay's in there too.
Yeah, so I didn't even know she existed. And then I come back to Fresno, and we're hanging out during the summer, and spending time with you at your parents' house. And then she comes along, and I didn't realize there was an older sister, and she's drop dead gorgeous, and we had good chemistry right off the bat, and like I said, the rest is kind of history. But it, like I said, it hasn't been without its struggles. I said, you mentioned, I did kind of summarize where we're at now, and we've got great grandkids, and they're sweet and wonderful, but the road has been bumpy. And like you mentioned, I don't think there's any blended family that doesn't come through or doesn't present its own struggles. Obviously, like I said, I'm a family law attorney, and so I see it firsthand. And I think that the struggles and things that I kind of faced firsthand have allowed me to offer a unique perspective to potential clients as well, to kind of look, I believe it or not, I know exactly what you're talking about. I know how that feels, and I know how difficult that can be, and it helps me kind of offer a new perspective to them.
And even before meeting, just for a little bit, even before meeting Lindsay, I mean, you had tried some other things, some other pursuits that didn't quite work out like you wanted, and ended up coming back to Fresno too a little bit, right? So I mean, there were some challenges prior to that, and then meeting Lindsay and kind of pressing the reset button a little bit in Fresno, and then that, I guess that felt good at that time too, but then new challenges kind of come from a newly started blended family. That, right? Yeah, no, definitely.
I before I'd met Lindsay, I'd spent some time in at BYU in Utah, had come back home and kind of did a reset, took some time off school. Again, I was raised by great parents, and they taught me good values, attending church and having kind of a good core fundamentals, morally and ethically. And, I'd lost my way a little bit, made some poor choices, and I guess maybe just enjoyed my early 20s like a lot of people did.
Sure.
But then, I had the opportunity to kind of come back to Fresno. I think meeting Lindsay was not coincidental.
Yeah.
It was like I said, I was being pulled different directions, but I was kind of lost. I didn't have a direction, and this really helped kind of ground me here, got me restarted back into school and whatnot. But then, it was a jump right in from one thing to the next. I mean, I said she had kids, and I had to become a stepdad at the same time. And I remember my mom told me, you don't casually date someone that has children. We probably should have grabbed some tissues because I'm a big sap, and I know I'll cry eventually. So I took that to heart, and I said, I've got kids to think about here too. That's a different dynamic. I'm not just get to be head over heels in love with this woman. I love her children. I've got to support them, and there's all other demands of me as well the moment you choose to marry someone with children, and it was a lot.
That's not one child. Child. That's
twins and
twins.
A nephew. Yeah, twin girls and a nephew.
We're talking Allie and Avery.
I'm sorry, my
twins.
nephew. Twin girls and a boy.
Allie and Avery are worth 6 kids.
So maybe.
Yeah, so they're not just inheriting kids, but the kids are a little older. Lindsay got pregnant really young, and so, I mean, they just took right to you and loved you right away like their own dad, I'm sure.
Oh,
You know,
yeah. I mean,
once you
it
got
was-
married, there was no testing or pushing the limits or anything.
Just
huh?
flawless.
Yeah, it was a Disney fairy tale right off the bat. No,
That's how it is in my house.
no, and
Everything's
actually
just easy.
they were great. You know, it just, like I said, it taught me parenting much more quickly. Like I said, I was on the accelerated plane. You know what I mean? You don't get this brain and this body to mold every step of the way. You know what I mean? You jump right in the middle. That's like, like I said, if there's a river running by you and you just jump right in, you don't start from the beginning. And so I'm trying to find my place where I can, step in and share some influence and teach, but not overstep bounds, because their dad's still totally in their life, and he is, and they share time. And so I've got to know my role. It was such a tough balance, and I think it's the hardest job. And like I said, this is insight that I share with my clients that I think really helps. I think it's the hardest job, like, in the world. You know what I mean? To become a step parent, to have to balance that, and especially then once I started having my children of my own, there's a big gap, in between that. But to balance, okay, this child's kind of my biological child, this one's not, and I have to know and balance how I handle the situations. It was a lot. It is
a lot.
I think there's two dynamics, like, and I'm not a stepdad, but this is just my observation, just coming what you're saying is, like, you love them like your own, so there's just, you love them, and I feel like I would take that same approach. I mean, it's like, I'm not going to love my stepkids any different than my actual kids. I mean,
100%.
To me, it'd be like they're my kids. But then there's still, like, just like with any parental relationship, you love them, but you also, like, there's the discipline and, like, the holding them accountable. And what that makes me think of is, like, in running a business, there's times where everyone has someone they report to, or, like, who's truly their boss or whatever. But there's also, like, crossover where, like, certain roles have to oversee other roles and follow up with them. And if you're never truly their boss, the follow up is always sucky for those people, because it's like, well, you're not my boss. I don't have to get that to you today.
Yeah.
I don't need to get that to you next week. You don't really have the power to. So that person then basically has to follow up with the boss, who then has to follow up with that person. That's almost what it makes me think of, like, with a step parent, because it's like,
it happens.
You're not really in the position to, like, you're walking the middle ground of, like, I can't. You do love them, and because you love them, you want to coach them, you want to train them, or you want to raise them. But, like, I'm sure there's times where, like, you hit that wall. You're like, I want to tell you, but I'm not gonna tell you.
Yeah.
Because it'll probably strain things more than not. It might upset the kids, might upset real dad or
dad on the other side,
whoever.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things to consider. So yeah, I couldn't. I probably don't think I could do it.
No,
without
it's
that.
I'm telling you, it's crazy difficult, and sure. I mean, I was told, you're not my real dad. I can't tell you how many times, and that's of no, the pressures. I say my job's so difficult, and it is, but again, more that I've learned in my line of work, the focus should be on the kids, and it's unbelievably difficult for the kids too, and so like I said, I don't fault them for anything that happened. I created a lot of my own problems as well, in our household and our dynamic and things like that. But like I said, it was great. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything, obviously. I mean, I have so many learning experiences and parental, experience that I've gained from doing that
Sure.
I think helps a lot.
No, and to clarify, I mean, Allie and Avery and Sean will probably end up watching this at some point. So we love you. No one's trying to fault you. But at the same time, there are real things that have to be navigated as part of this dynamic. And so, I mean, I feel like anyone, I'm sure, would experience that in your shoes and what you're going through.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's also worth saying, it's not like at the time you married Lindsay, so she's got older kids. It's obviously your second marriage, her second marriage, your first. And then, I mean, you haven't, you're still building your life. Like, you're still navigating or building up to what you want to do, what you want to become. So it's not like you're doing this, like, having, like, I don't know, arrived in your career yet.
Right.
You're also doing this, like, you're going into this, like, with, hey, I've still got whatever I decide to do, school, work, and everything else still, like, to go.
Yeah.
That's a pretty heavy lift. I mean, even if it's just for any going into a traditional marriage, blended family or not, that's a heavy lift.
Yeah, I don't ever remember hearing.
But I feel like on
law
top
school.
of that, you've inherited some kids or some stepkids, and you still have life to go and decisions
life,
to make.
yep.
So, like, where goes, where did the trail go from there, and dip into some of that.
Yeah. So it was difficult trying to navigate that, because you think you have this perception of what life's going to be like. You know what I mean? Let's find the woman I love. Let's get married. We'll work our way through getting careers and having children and kind of managing all that. I don't know. That's kind of my perception of what I thought life would be. And obviously, meeting Lindsay and seeing that change, or knowing that my kind of path was going to change was not a rude awakening, but I mean, I had to make adjustments quickly on the fly. You know what I mean? I had to kind of change what I was going to do, but at the same time, I knew I needed to be productive and provide for my family. And it was hard. They said, I've got middle schoolers, and I'm still trying to navigate working through, I'm trying to remember the timeline of it, my bachelor's degree and things like that, where
I'm tripping out that Xander's starting middle school next year. And like I'm not even thinking, I'm like, thinking about it right now. He just started off his marriage with middle schoolers, and I'm like tripping out that Xander's starting middle school next year.
Just getting into it.
Yeah. Anyway, go on.
No. And so it was a lot. I was trying to juggle a lot of things at once. It was stressful. And again, it was, as much as I thought I prepared myself for it mentally, emotionally, it was more than I could handle. I was, let's see, I finished my undergrad at Fresno State, and was
in what?
In mathematics.
Okay, so you were going to be a teacher?
Yeah, the goal was to be a teacher. I'd always enjoyed math. I had done a couple different things. I'd looked into a little bit of accounting, with your dad, potential, opportunity.
Realized how boring
as heck. Yep.
Yeah, no, I did. I went on one audit with him,
Yep.
and he just sat in a room with binders stacked around him, like
Yep.
looked like Scrooge McDuck.
They love the
Yep.
binders.
And,
Yeah,
and I
love
just
'em.
didn't speak to anybody for 12 hours, and I just couldn't do it. So, but I like, so I like numbers, I like math. So I got my degree in math and was going to teach. And then I kind of was, during this time while I was finishing off school, like I said, being a step parent was really tough for me, and I didn't handle it the way I probably should have. I know I didn't handle it the way I should have. I got into drinking. I got into coping with the stresses and frustrations, through alcohol. And
So that was an outlet for you.
It was obviously, one of the most unhealthy ones. I had run in high school. I'd played a bunch of sports. I was a good athlete, and I was always active, and I just slowly kind of lost that desire.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't even know where that happened, but yeah, for whatever reason, I turned my coping to drinking. It's obviously, it's an easy way to do it. You get to escape, you get to go numb, you kind of just ignore your problems, thinking they'll go away even though they don't. Obviously it takes forever to learn that they don't. You just kind of beat your head against the wall until change happens. But that's what I did. And like I said, I made our family dynamic much more difficult.
What, as much as you feel comfortable sharing, because I feel like we made a little bit of a leap there. So, what was frustrating at that time? Like, what was eating at you? What was the stress? What was the stresses? You're in school, you've got a young blended family, some teenagers you're trying to raise as shared raise as a step parent. What are the things that are, going on at that time that kind of really made you stressed out or contributed to that?
Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it on the head. Most of it was it was a lot being a step parent, and it was just trying to, I think I had a perception of how I was going to raise my family, and quickly realizing that that dynamic was not going to be feasible in a blended household. And so I was struggling with, just teenagers in general are super difficult. And then, like I said, to be a step parent to teenagers and to know when I can say something, when I can't say something, trying to, again, kids are expensive, and I'm still here working through my bachelor's degree. I'm waiting tables,
financial,
financial struggles. Like I said, waiting tables, working jobs as much as I could. I was refereeing soccer and lacrosse and just filling up the time as much as I could. And I was just being stretched thin.
And it's not just financial, it's also your time is split a million ways. So you're trying to give your time to your kids, but you also got to work, and you've got trying to go to church, you're going to school. So it's like you feel like you're being pulled. See, I can relate to this. Anyone can, I think, that's going through school and raising families, we talked about starting families young. One of the challenges I feel like is you just feel like you get pulled a million ways. And then what ends up happening is I feel like the pendulum swings too much one way, starts to feel good in that one area, but then like it's usually something on one part of the other barks at you to like, you've left me too much. You come back this way, and then you go back that way, and it's like I'm suffering over here, whether it's school, whether it's home, whether it's church, whether it's work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, you're accountable for all of these
So
things
like a little
too.
bit of that,
These
that's
are
going on.
Serious things.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I put a lot of responsibility on myself as the dad and the father figure, and
And how
the
long are you
patriarch
married?
in the house.
How long are you married at this time-ish, like give or take?
I got married when I was 23, so this was right around 4 years or so.
4 years in.
Yeah.
And then like had you and Lindsay talked about like you're starting your own family, or like is that even in the consideration at this point yet, or like?
Yeah. No, we had wanted to start a family rather quickly. That was part of the conversation was, Sean was 4. Yeah, 4 when we kind of were dating. I think he just turned 5 by the time we were married. And so we wanted to grow our family and have them still be closer in age.
Yeah.
And so we'd wanted to grow our family. It wasn't happening, which is obviously, like I said, another huge stress. But yeah.
You've just got like a pyramid going on.
Yeah.
You've got teenage kids, wanting to have kids of your own, and that's not been happening for a few years. You're working all over the place. You're still in school.
Money.
Yeah, you've got financial challenges, and all that's just like pulling you different ways and piling up.
And you're drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then drinking is kind of the out. So those are the stresses,
Mm-hmm.
and then the drinking is kind of the release and like the outlet on that.
Yeah, and I had always been really successful in pretty much everything I'd done. I was a good athlete, good enough athlete. Always did well.
He's
soccer, basketball.
He's an okay athlete.
Well, I'm better now. Thanks to Coach. Thanks to Coach over here. We don't need to put out race times or anything yet, but maybe we can get to that.
Evan's faster than both of us. We'll say it right now. For now.
But yeah, this had kind of been the first real adversity I had faced. Again, I was a good student. I went to BYU on a partial scholarship. I never had to work hard in high school at studying. It always came natural to me. And so then now when I'm in this situation where all of a sudden I have to work hard at something, or I'm not succeeding like I'm used to, I think it really derailed me. And then I get on top of 6 or 7 other directions I'm being pulled, and I'm putting pressure on myself to just be as successful as I'm used to in every aspect. And it's just impossible. And then again, it's social pressures or familial or, religious or whatever it is, that's what I had built up in my head was I need to be successful at all these things. And I can't, I just got to keep going.
We talked about this last week. See, to me, and I can relate to it. I'm not nailing Evan. This is what I was getting as perfectionism. I need to be successful at all these things. It's got to be
right.
Everything's got to be right. If not, and this is where I've had struggles or breakdowns of my own, or like, you talked about anxiety attacks or whatever, and just for me, it has kind of been born of in the past of like, you feel like it's all piled up, and once you start to really buckle into that feeling of like, I'm not really doing any of these things, and I'm used to doing all these things well, I feel like, not to minimize what you're talking about, because
Sure.
I feel like any normal person listening to this can totally relate, including Sean and I here. But I also feel like if I'm hearing it right, unless you correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a little bit of added pressure from yourself based on your own expectations or your own past performance that is on top of all those things.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and it got to a point where, I was feeling things start to crumble around me, and so instead of facing them head on or acknowledging that I wasn't as great as maybe I thought I was, or I needed help to be successful in these areas, I said I just kind of turned to drinking instead of, to escape, as opposed to facing, the challenges head on. Mm-hmm. And I said I was still young, 20. 26 or 27 at this point, or wherever I was, late 20s, and had just, again, jumped into a family. I didn't have a ton of life experience. I went from being a young, early 20-year-old kid, being, making foolish decisions, to like stepdad real quick, and so I didn't have a lot of adversity to build from, and this was just like all at once inundated me. I I became an alcoholic, and it just spiraled and it got worse. I was, like you said, I had these expectations and I wanted to provide for my family and do well. And so I felt like if I were, continuing to have a job, that was kind of at least good enough. I was just barely doing the minimum, but was totally absent in the areas that I know now are more important. You know what I mean? I wasn't there for my stepkids like I needed to be, emotionally and around their home and showing them what, a dad or father figure should look like in our home and what a husband should look like. Because I chose to drink and be absent, like I said, either physically or mentally and emotionally.
Without you being too hard on yourself, I mean, and I understand where you're coming from, but the reality is, I think, a lot of dads, probably all of us, can also say that, that I feel like, especially as I've gotten older as a dad, that you get so into like the providing mode, that like you forget that part of the providing is the raising.
Yeah.
Like you're so focused on just like making the money, having the job, working and kind of being the provider in the physical sense, that you forget to like be emotionally and spiritually accessible. And so I'm not trying to, I get that you're saying like with the alcohol and stuff you felt like that made you even more so, but I guess I'm just highlighting that I think that's just a challenge also, that
sure
dads like myself and Sean and others just fall short of in general. And I mean, the good news is the fact that you even say that out loud means you're aware of it. So that's a good thing, because I think there's a lot of dads and parents who don't really truly ever become aware of that, to be honest. So I think it's a good thing that you even recognize it, you know what I mean?
So, world's crumbling, we're drinking.
Yeah,
Let's hear it.
Well, like I said, to touch on what you said, Aaron, is I don't mind, like I said, I get emotional because I think of the thing of just, because I'm an emotional guy, I guess. I think, but I don't mind. And I don't mind thinking about those things because they motivate me.
You're packing in years worth of stuff into a 45-minute podcast. So, I mean, I think it's normal to feel emotions.
Yeah. But like I said, I use that as motivation to think about the things that, that maybe I did poorly without pulling myself down. But anyway, so to move on, I was, like I said, drinking, things are falling down around me. It all culminated, again, I was a functional alcoholic. I was able to finish school miraculously.
Show up to work on time.
Yeah. I mean, I lost a couple jobs, but I've always found a new one, is what I always say. And I was able to, like I said, I brought home money. I was, able to wait tables and like I said, came to a head one afternoon. I was helping my dad again, drunk as could be. I was helping him build a fence, and was traveling home from my parents' house back home. And I got in an accident. I rear-ended somebody, and and that was kind of, well, you'd like to say that was kind of your rock bottom or the turning point. In actuality, it wasn't. But that started the process. Now all of a sudden I'm in legal trouble, and I've got a DUI, and I've got to handle all that came with that. And so
on top of all the other stresses, it's just another thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a tough point for my wife, because she had done the best she could to basically raise 4 kids. I mean, she had her 3 kids, and then she had me, and she had to babysit me a lot.
My wife says the same thing.
Yeah, I felt like I said, I'm there and I'm providing money, and I thought that was fine, but then I don't realize everything else that my wife is doing. She's making up for everything else that I'm not providing. You know what I mean? And so then now all of a sudden, Evan's in legal trouble, and I spent a night in jail, and then now I've got to find a way to get this under control. It's not hidden anymore. This, my addiction is out in the open, and I need to figure out, because my family's suffering, financially we're still struggling. I don't have a goal. I don't have direction. I need to figure something out. And so, like I said, that started the process. I was facing some serious consequences. I I had had years of practicing drinking, and so my tolerance was high. I had a blood alcohol content and just all these aggravating factors. And I was facing, serious consequences. And my attorney said, well, let's put you on an ankle monitor. Let's, this will help give you credit so we can keep you out of jail, essentially. I mean, I was looking at jail time. And he said, this, monitors your blood alcohol through your sweat, and you can get credit for this, do that. Well, typical addict fashion, I just felt like the rules didn't apply to me. I was like, whatever, I'll keep drinking. This is fine. We'll figure it out. And so I did. And I kept drinking on this monitor, and it would submit all these results. And finally one day my attorney calls me, and I can't even remember the words he said, but he basically was just like, are you flipping stupid? He's like, I've got all these reports back, and you're sitting here still drinking. I said, we go to court in 5 days, they're going to send you to jail. I mean, you're a menace to society. You're going to be out there causing problems. The judge is going to put you away. And that's when like my world kind of stopped, and I was just like, I can't go to jail. Like, that's crazy. I knew I had a problem drinking, but just like, I'm like, alcohol is legal. I mean, I guess what I'm doing with it's not, but it just didn't seem, I'm like, I'm not a criminal. I'm not going to go to jail. And so he offered the opportunity he said, if you can get into a program, you might be able to avoid some jail time. But he's like, we're talking about a serious program. You can't go to a 30 or 60 day program, even 90-day program. He's like, you need to find something serious because you want to avoid legal problems and because you need help. Yeah. And he told me that. And I said, you're right. And luckily, with his resources, I got into a program, the Fresno Rescue Mission. I think it was Tuesday when he called me. By that Friday, I was in the rescue mission, and my hearing was that following Monday. And so, like, I got in that afternoon, like the last bed, and it was, again, it was a whirlwind. I talked to my...
That's typical addict fashion, too.
Yeah, just the last...
We always find a way to do the right thing at, like, literally the last 10 seconds.
The 12th hour.
Before the consequences come slamming down.
Yeah, and like I said, I was fortunate, but it was a huge decision. I mean, again, those couple of days were a whirlwind. I had to kind of get my work schedule or work situation figured out. They said they'd hold my job for me. And my wife and I had to talk. This is an 18-month program. Again, I wasn't allowed to be in a short program.
And that meant you had to be in that residence for a year and a half that whole time.
Right. So it's an 18-month inpatient program downtown. They did have, the last 6 months was a transition period where you weren't in the facility, you were living in an apartment, but again, run by the program. Yeah. You were able to work and get a job. The whole year you were inpatient. I didn't get to leave. You got some visits on the weekend eventually once you earned them.
So for 1 year, you could not work.
Correct.
And you have a family, and you had to be away from them, but then you also couldn't even really provide the way you normally could, and you only had some visitation during that year.
Yeah, and that, like I said, and that was one of the scary things that my wife and I were talking about. I said, look, she was working as well. We were working to make ends meet. I mean, again, I didn't have a career yet at that point, and so we knew that the numbers weren't going to add up if I wasn't working. But she said, you need to do this. I want you to do this. I sat down with my parents, sat down with Lindsay, your parents, and we talked about it. And they said, look, this is what you need to do. We'll help take care of your family. Go do what you need to do. Yeah. And I'm forever grateful for the people that made that happen. I needed to do that.
We talked about having
that's your circle right there.
We talked about having a tight circle and certain people that, obviously parents, I think, tend to come up often in that circle, but obviously in a situation like that was, huge. So that's...
Yeah, because it was not in my understanding of, how to keep my family going. This wasn't right. It's counterproductive. You're like, let me go away from my family. Let me not provide for them. Let me be away from them for a year to actually help provide for them. You know what I mean? I knew I had to do it.
But I mean, to stop there a little bit. Well, actually, finish. So you said for 1 year it was inpatient, and then for the 6 months after that, you could start working.
Yeah. So
you still had to stay there.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. So I still had to live they had an apartment facility that I had to live at, and I was able to work. So you can go to work, but you also had to check back in every night. You couldn't leave before a certain period of time, you had to be home by a certain period of time unless you had a specific work schedule. You had to come in and check in with the kind of the house manager that ran the apartment complex, make sure you're not coming home drunk or high or anything, you know what I mean? And so it was, like I said, the same kind of restrictions, but I just had the freedom to now go work. And so again, I'm living in the same city as my family in an apartment, like away from them, trying to like continue to take care of myself. And it was really hard.
Did you have a phone
away.
in the last 6 months?
Did
like
I
a cell
have
phone?
I think I did. Yes, I was,
Right.
but it's one of those like government funded phones.
Okay.
Even
You know
still,
what I
a year and a half, I mean, where you're really not sharing truly like living space with your spouse, your kids. I mean, it's a lot of time.
That would drive
Yeah,
me
it-
insane.
It's
I
a
mean,
long time.
Again, I spent one night in a holding cell, so I've never been in jail, but it probably was close to jail. That's what a lot of people told me that were in there that had been in jail. I mean, I was just in a big room, a bunch of bunk beds with 68 other guys, you know.
For a year and a half.
Yeah, for the first year. Yeah, the second half I was able to get an apartment split with a couple other guys, but yeah, you're just in a, you know, and it was something else. I mean, I was able to, it provided me the opportunity to be able to like I said, step away, to let the pressure go of having to provide for my family, having to know what to say or how to say things to my kids. I let that go and trusted other people in my circle to help keep that running while I was gone, which was really difficult. But it allowed me to be able to, like I said, refocus myself, dig back into, reading my scriptures, focusing on, my Savior Jesus Christ and my religion and my foundation that I had grown up with that I'd lost along the way. And it provided me that opportunity. I was able to recenter myself. I think I succeeded in the program as well as, as kind of ended up being almost a mentor there at the program to other guys. It was a great experience. And again, it afforded me the opportunity to become sober, to be able to have essentially another chance at life. You know what I mean? I had some pretty dark periods of time there, where again, I was meeting with my attorney while still finishing up my legal battles. And I broke down to him one time and I said, I feel like I'm going to be relegated to far less than what I thought I was capable of. I have these dreams of being a teacher or being an administrator or, these lofty things. I was good in school. And then now I've got this record and I've got legal problems and I couldn't even become a teacher. I couldn't get my credential in the state of California because I had a felony in my record. And so I'd have to wait for 3 years for probation to get that, expunged and all that. And I was just like, I'm going to be waiting tables, trying to provide for a family for the rest of my life. And it was such a breakdown. And then he said to me, I get it. It's scary and it's tough, but he said, have you ever thought about law school? And I said, well, did you hear what I just said? Like, I can't even be a teacher, because I've got a felony. What are you talking about going to law school and be a lawyer? And he said, you find the law is a pretty forgiving industry. You will have to take care of your legal stuff, your probation. Law school will afford you the time to do that, to kind of let that play out. But what about why don't you take the LSAT and see how it goes? And just him offering that opportunity to me just totally like lifted my spirits and just gave me a new perspective on opportunity that I could do. Yeah. And it really helped. And so I'm trying to remember the time frame. It was probably late spring when he told me that. And then I had to finish out the rest of the program. I was in the inpatient till, for another 8 months or so. And then as soon as I could get into the apartment, I was working. I started taking some LSAT books and reading through them and found out I had about 30 days before the next LSAT, which was the last one you could take before we could get admitted into San Joaquin. And that's the local college, the law school here. I didn't have the opportunity to go elsewhere. I wasn't going to be able to go anywhere else. And so, I took that opportunity and that thought and I held on to it and I ran with it. And I said, I can do this. And, I'm smart enough. I could figure this out. And so I took the LSAT. You want me to keep running into? Yeah. Okay. So I took the LSAT, got my results back, and as I kind of talked about before, when I had gotten my bachelor's degree, I was drinking a lot during that time. So my grades suffered. I was able to get my degree just barely, but my grades were not good. And
C's get degrees.
yeah. Well, listen, I made it, so it worked. And I remember knowing that I needed to do well in the LSAT to kind of compensate for that, because it's kind of a two-pronged thing. How well you did in undergrad, how well you did in your LSAT increases your chances of admission. And so I knew that I needed to kind of kill the LSAT, and I did really well. Well enough, like I said, to kind of offset the poor grades. And I remember talking
in a 30-day span studying.
Yeah,
Wow.
And that was a tough test. Up until that point, that was the hardest test I've ever taken. Obviously, the bar has now superseded that. Just that little test called the bar. But at that point, I mean, it was tough. It was hard, and like I said, I'm just grateful that I was able to focus as much as I could.
Yeah.
And got into law school and started that fall in 2017, I think.
Yeah. And then so come out okay, you get this bit of advice, you pursue it. In 30 days, you study for the LSAT, you pass it, or you get a good enough score on it to get into the college, San Joaquin College of Law here. Yeah. You get released from the program, and then what from there? Yeah. So, again, it was a whirlwind couple months there. Got released from the program, was able to go back home, back and live with my family, and it was incredible. It was great to be back there. That felt nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Again, I had been absent for a long period of time though, and again, my stepdaughters were in high school. I think they had just kind of started high school when I went into the program. So again, I missed basically a year of normal home time. Again, I'd see them occasionally on the weekends.
So just like surreal going back into the house and living
It was. I don't.
Just like, what on earth?
I haven't really rethought about that time when I came home.
I mean, I've done
that had to
long stints, nothing like that. But
good.
even 30, 60 days, I was just like, I'm almost uncomfortable. Well, I am uncomfortable in my own house, and I didn't like it.
It was really.
I hated it.
Yeah, it was tough.
This is my freaking house, man.
It was tough getting back. I mean, like I said, the beginning of the program, I had a 45-day blackout period where I couldn't speak to anybody. Like I said, when I checked in and said bye to my family that Friday afternoon, I didn't talk to them again until 45 days later. They just assumed everything was okay, and so then coming back home and trying to assume that role was tough. Again, and that's what we learned a lot in the mission was, look, eventually, guys, we're all going to be back in the real world. We're going to face all these stresses. We've been living in a bubble in this program, and so we're really limited on the amount of stressors and expectations and things that we're facing, and we're getting sober, and that's good. Yeah. But now you're going to have to take everything you learn and move out into the real world where now everything starts bombarding you again. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so it was tough. I mean, I had to work on my sobriety. I had to stay on it by going to meetings, going to Celebrate Recovery, again, and then like I said, and everything that I left was pretty much there waiting for me. Financial obligations, like I said, raising stepkids, things like that. Not wanting to continue to grow our family. It's all waiting for you there when you get out. And on top of that, I got to maintain my sobriety. I got to work on my recovery. Now I got law school, and it was a lot. It took a team effort. My parents helping a ton. That support system, that circle you guys were talking about. My in-laws helped a lot. And it was just law school was crazy. I was working at a restaurant, just one at the time. No, when I came out, I had 2 restaurant jobs. I was working at Macaroni Grill and California Pizza Kitchen. Lindsay was still working at Clovis West as an instructional aide. She'd been doing that for, at that point, about 11 years. And so we were like ships passing in the night. I would go. Well, she'd work in the morning. I'd stay at home, try to study as much as I could. Then she'd come home at lunch, and I'd switch and go work the day shift at a restaurant, and then come home about 5:30, go straight to law school from 6:30 to 9:30. Then come home, do some homework, and go back to bed. Oh, and I meant to throw in there.
Do you have a driver's license?
No, I didn't have a driver's license. That's true. Good point. So obviously you get DUI, you don't get your license. So I was getting rides around town as much as I could. There was a period of time when I was reffing lacrosse that I rode the bus. I had a binder with me of all the routes, because this was, obviously we had smartphones. I don't think I had a good one yet, and so I was just working off bus routes in my binder. And I would take bus routes. I would ref lacrosse games in Edison and Hoover. And then, we were making it happen. And I would ride a bike. Eventually I got a bike. I think you got me into triathlon first, or maybe I had been riding the bike first, where I was like, I got to do something. I can't I need to find, a little more reliable modes of transportation. And so I borrowed a road bike from a friend of mine, and would just ride everywhere. I rode to CPK.
That's what I remember.
Yeah, rode to CPK.
Riding everywhere.
Park it in the back, where the dumpster is, and would work. And then, even to the summer, which was awful. Because I'm riding the bike back home and in the middle of the heat at 5:30 in the afternoon.
And a whole black outfit.
Yeah. Black shirt, black pants. Scarf down some lunch or scarf down some dinner, and then ride to class.
We have limited time, but I want to make sure that we, your story is really good. And from the time you come home, back in, so you've kind of touched on some things. You're back into work. Some obligations are still there waiting for you. You went into law school, right? Got accepted. So talk about, as much as you can condense, but I don't want you to rush it too much. But, where did you go from here? I guess from where to where you are now. Coming out of the program to where you are now. Give us that kind of Cliff Notes version. A little.
Okay, so law school, like I said, was the roughest probably 4 years of, aside from being an alcoholic, but just like obligation wise.
Yeah.
And Lindsay helped me along the way. I mean, we look back at those times and we just kind of laugh about it now because, and I forgot to mention, we did get pregnant with our first child.
Yeah.
So Tucker was born in the fall of 16. Yeah. So again,
that's crazy.
So yeah, first year of law school, we had Tucker.
You started to collect some wins, some little wins.
Yeah.
That's what started happening.
Well, and it was, again, there's no coincidence that I get out of the program and then we have our first child, it was 7 or 8 months later. You know what I mean? When I'm sober, when I'm ready, I think the Lord, 100%, it's divine intervention. The Lord knew I was finally ready to have a family.
Yeah.
We look back at it now, I wasn't ready to grow my family. I couldn't handle the family that I had then.
Yeah.
So again, I'm starting to get some wins. Getting into law school.
That works.
Yeah.
Really
not
I believe in divine timing 100%. Yeah.
And so, like I said, these wins start stacking up. Getting into law school, I've got great jobs waiting for me when I get out. We have Tucker, and it made like I said, the first year of law school tough. I was working a couple jobs, a couple restaurants. I was also cleaning offices at night. I was actually cleaning this office.
Yeah.
At night.
I forgot about that.
That's awesome.
When Gerald was here, when your dad was here.
So 3 jobs with a bike, a new kid, newly sober, in law school.
Yeah.
And still going.
And working 2 restaurants.
Okay.
Yeah, we had Tucker 7 days after I started law school. And so that made for a fun first year. It's the hardest year. It's like it's just like a filtering period. They weed you out as much as they can. Yeah. And so that first year I'm dealing with a newborn, 3 jobs. Lindsay's got a job. Stepkids still, they're getting older. They're getting middle of high school. And it was just a lot going on.
Graduate.
Get through law school, graduate.
That must have felt good.
Yeah, I mean, it did.
Another huge win.
And of course, but it's like right as COVID's coming out. So we didn't even get a ceremony. So that was kind of frustrating. But yeah.
I remember watching you virtually. We were watching you.
Yeah. We did. Yeah,
we cheered for you.
Yeah. We had a virtual ceremony. And again, that was a little victory, getting through law school. But we all know that just getting your law degree, being a JD doesn't do you any good.
Right.
You got to pass the bar. And so
I remember Evan Newport. We'd be all at the beach having fun, and all I remember is Evan for like 2 summers
with the cards,
with his huge law book thing.
I remember the cards
and his cards on the beach. And I'm just looking at that like,
put the cards away.
Goodness gracious, that just looks terrible.
What are you doing? Like
torturing himself on the beach,
right? Well, and it was again, COVID kind of threw a wrench in it. Normally, the bar test was like when we're on our Newport trip.
Yeah,
I was scheduled and ready to take the bar when we were on our vacation, then it gets kicked back because of COVID. So instead of having taken it, being done, I'm sitting there studying still.
Yeah.
Like I said, and again,
and you wanted to stay fresh. You don't want to like study and then let it all go.
Yeah. All of a sudden, I realized I have a couple extra months. No, you can't let it lapse and then try to pick it back up. So my studying period just got elongated. And again, when you're studying for the bar, most people, 95, 97% of people don't work either. I mean, that's your full-time job. You're trying to cover 13 subjects, some specific to California, some, national, nationally covered. And so you got to stay on top of it. I studied in the office where you're at now, Sean. I spent months studying in there every day, 8 to 5.
It's the best office in this whole office.
Well,
for sure.
I think maybe I made it that way because I studied for the bar there. But I remember the January 7th, 2021 was the night the results came out for the bar. And that was the day, like I said, if I'm going to get emotional by anything, that was probably one of the days. Because you log on after 7 o'clock at night or whatever it is. And so I knew all that day,
That whole day it's all just weighing on
They
your
make
chest.
you wait
Yeah.
till
You're thinking
7
about nothing
o'clock
else.
at night.
Yeah, you're supposed to be productive. I was working as a law clerk at
That's
the firm
messed
here
up.
now, and you just know it's coming, and it was so tough to like finally get home and be normal when it's just waiting. And so I remember finally sitting down at the computer. We log in, and Lindsay was next to me, and the screen refreshes. I'm hitting refresh over and over again, and I'm waiting. I'm like, it's 6 o'clock.
I would
It's 6
totally
o'clock.
do the same
Oh my
thing.
gosh.
And then finally it pops up, and you get those 4 little letters, PASS, and I just died.
Boom.
I mean, I
Just
just
drop to the ground.
Oh my gosh, I broke down into tears, was sobbing, ugly tears, and I
Love
I,
it.
That's
I
all they
called my stepdaughters, and I called my parents, and I called your parents, and it was
It's the best.
such a culmination of years and years of work and trial and adversity and tribulation and resilience to overcome all that, to finally like get that
So
affirmation.
how many years from car wreck to passing the bar?
Car wreck was the end of 2014, beginning of 2021, so just over 6
And
years.
lest we overlook one tiny detail, who was the judge that swore you in as an attorney again? Who was the judge?
So the judge, Brian Alvarez is his name. He was my judge. He was a good and fair judge when I was going through my criminal stuff. I mean, like I said, the facts were what they were. There was no arguing what I did and my
Sure.
blood alcohol. But he's the one that sentenced me and presided over my case.
When you
And
got in
then-
the accident,
The
and all
DUI
that stuff.
stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
when I got on the accident. And then, so once you pass the bar, you have to be sworn in by a judicial officer. It can be another attorney, it can be a judge, anybody that you want. And I reached out to his office, and I thought it'd be pretty neat to have him swear me in
That's
as
cool.
an attorney. And so I reached out to him, and I talked to him, and he did a little research and kind of remembered my case, because again, it had been years.
Yeah.
And he kind of remembered my name and who I was, and he was honored. And so we met at his office or in his chambers. And
So how did that feel to be looking him in the eyes to be sworn in instead of sentenced? That you probably felt. That's a full
Yeah.
circle.
it was really cool. It was
Yeah.
really cool. It's a
He
great
probably
picture we
liked
have.
that too.
I'm sure.
He loved it, and he said this is one of those. He's like, this is why I do what I do. Because so many times being a criminal judge, you see recidivists who continue to make poor choices, and they're back in front of him constantly. And he said, I see people come back, into my courtroom all the time. But for you to come back in my courtroom under these circumstances is why I do what I do.
Well, and for you to reach out to him, think about how many people resent the judges that sentence them, or probably view them as that was unfair, or this or that. To the humility to reach back out and to view him, the way you did, I think that's not an easy thing, and that's a mature and a grown thing to do. I'm glad we've. How do you top this story?
I don't know.
For digging in. This is going to be one of the Hall of Fame dig stories. I
Yeah.
feel like this is a tough one to.
That's why we wanted him
overcome,
on.
and I love it. It's such a good story, all of it. So and we have a few minutes remaining. We've got the full story. I mean, almost. You got your passed the bar. You're an admitted attorney. Worked in a firm here locally for Justin Harris, who we all know, great guy.
Mhm.
And then opportunity came to be able to take on a firm, which you've been doing now for the last, you said 8 months, right?
Yeah.
And now you get to work with families that are going through, it's like family law, right?
Mhm.
So their own struggles, things you've gone through yourself.
Yeah.
So, I want to chime in on some things that I want to make sure I highlight really, really briefly.
Sure.
And then I have some questions for you, and Sean can chime in briefly too. I feel like, I don't think you can speak enough to just like resilience. I don't even think it's, we've offered like tools, things that you can do. Sometimes you just gotta hang in there. You just gotta freaking hold on and hang in there. I'm saying it, it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes there are no tools.
Mhm.
Sometimes there is no, hey, do ABC and it's all gonna, I feel like there's a few times there where it's just like, yeah, this is hard. And you know what, Evan? You're gonna have to go through some crap to climb out and to go through it. And I feel like for most people in this situation, that's where they would have tapped out, and they do. And that's what's so sad is so many of these situations with, alcohol, whatever else that, that they unfortunately do, remain the victim, and they do tap out. 'Cause that's the easy, I don't know if I'd call it the easier route. I actually probably wouldn't use that word, but I think you get what I'm saying. It would require a lot of work to do what you've done, but you did. And so I think there's just something to be said that hey, you got to hang in there. You just got to have deep grit and really dig in and just hang in there. And then on top of that, though, we have talked about some things that I see it in his story, which is we talked about failure 1 or 2 podcasts back, and just the role that it plays in the whole grand scheme, and how it's just a necessity to the overall trajectory of, climbing life and doing life. You had some big ones. You had some real hard stumbles and some real hard falls that you've described. But I feel like the moment, even when I was just watching you talk about it, you could tell you lit up a little bit. When you law school, it was just you had this goal, and credit to the attorney who was talking to you. I don't know what his name was, but credit to a person that's hey, Evan, redirect. It's not over. Just redirect, okay? I think it's so, and I talked about this, sometimes you hit rock bottom, you hit the ground, and you just think oh my gosh, the world's ended. And it's Evan, the world is big. There are other things. You have other talents and skills. And it's just oh yeah. And then it's you're just okay, law, let's check this out. 30 days study. And then we talked about momentum, and then you do well on the LSAT. And I'm sure that in that moment, even if you didn't go through law, that was huge, because that was a little bit of momentum and a tiny little win that was hey, I've still got this. I've still got some juice in the tank. I am a smart person. I'm a capable person. I'm in a tough spot right now, but I just studied for and passed the LSAT in 30 days.
Yeah.
That's something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it definitely felt good. Because I remember Jeff Hammerschmidt was the attorney's name. And I said, he's got a great reputation. I think a lot of it has to do with managing clients. And he's seen people in that spot that I was in, I'm sure hundreds, thousands of times, where you feel destitute, you feel, just broken down, you have nowhere to go. And he was able to bring me up through it. And I remember the phone call from the admissions department that I made. I was riding in a car heading towards River Park, and I got her on the phone, and I said, I think she got my LSAT results first. And then so she told me, and she said, I can't remember how she worded it, but it's something along the lines of wait, have you taken the LSAT before? Or she was kind of maybe surprised at the results, because I think she was looking at my grades from my undergrad.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? And so I said, no, I'm a sharp kid. It's in there somewhere. And she said, well, you did well. You're in for sure.
Yeah.
I didn't have an admission letter at that point, but she said,
Yeah.
no, you won't have any problem getting in with that
Yeah.
LSAT score.
Yeah.
And I remember that. Like I said, that was some of the best news I'd had in a long time. I prayed so long. I said, I just said, Heavenly Father, get me into law school. Just let me get in, and I promise you,
Yeah.
I will take it where I need to go.
Finish
Yeah.
the rest.
And so it was.
My other thought is it's so easy to sit there looking at an attorney, a businessman, a teacher, whoever, and I think we're just going through so much life that's you kind of just your visual of people is oh, they're accomplished, they're just they I think you just kind of have this picturesque vision of what it looks like to get to that journey.
Yeah.
Which has not been your journey, and I think it's probably not for more than we realize for people.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing all of it too, and my other thought is you know what? What a freaking cool attorney. I'm just if I had to choose, and I've got option A, who's maybe it's someone who is squeaky clean and it just kind of made their way through life, past the bar, and now they're doing family law, whatever. But if I'm in a crunch and I'm in spite of the mistakes you've made, the things you've done, and I'm a dad in a tight situation or something, and or maybe I'm struggling with alcohol and that's affected my familiar relationships, I'd rather work with Evan than probably lawyer A.
So would I.
Well, I said, and I've had clients where they said they've had specific instances where I can relate, and I can say to them, like I said, we keeping boundaries. I've said, look, I know 100% what you're going through.
Your baggage has literally become your asset.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wasn't there a country song, a little mud on the tires?
Yeah. But I just, anyway, those are some observations, some takeaways that I have. I don't know if you have anything further to add. I have one final question I want to ask Evan.
I'm just going to make a
close.
statement. I think it's funny addicts, alcoholics, we talked about this maybe a week or two ago. We have the tendency to do things wrong in order to like subconsciously motivate us into doing great things. It is the funniest thing. At least I am that way. And I'm not saying you purposely did that, but we always
Almost like
find
you've-
ourselves,
like
and it's
you put your-
beyond the 11th hour.
Like you put your back against the wall a little bit.
I mean,
Now it's time to.
It's like all dirty tests. You're going to jail. Okay, I'm in a program 10 minutes before court starts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then, okay, now I'm an attorney. 7 years later. It's
like, oh, what? I got to take the LSAT in 30 days? Let's do it. You know?
For some reason, we really, really push the envelope. But I know a lot of people like you and I that just, everyone has their different version of success, but they find it. And they've got a great story, and they're great people with a great heart. And I thrive among people like that. I love it. And that's why I do what I do. That's why we do what we do. You know, so that's my takeaway. I love that.
Yeah, and I think it motivates me. Like I said, that's why I enjoy what I'm doing now. Again, I did a little more civil litigation when I was with Justin, and I think maybe just the nature of that part of law is much more slow moving, whereas you've got in family law, you've got much more definite timelines. You know, where you see results, and so you see these people, they come in, and you know, the kind of the slogan on my website is steadfast advocacy in your greatest time of need. People come into my office and they want a consultation, and the things that are most important to them, you know, their family and their, you know, their property and children, and those things are crumbling down around them. And so they need help. And I said, I've got experience I can draw on to help them with that.
Yeah.
To help build them up, you know.
And I'm sure when they say things like what you were through, like, it couldn't get worse than this, you're probably like, actually,
Yeah.
actually.
We'll save it up for another time.
Yeah.
We could talk, you know.
Listen to my podcast.
My closing question is this, and you take the time you need to answer. I don't want you to rush through this question, but we'll end it on this.
Okay.
Evan, today, okay, what would you say to Evan 7-8 years ago, or anyone that's in that similar situation? What would your advice be? What would you say?
Well, I think
to get through it.
Yeah, I think what you said, you know, resonated when you said sometimes you just got to hang on. You know what I mean? There are tools and there's coping mechanisms and there's you know, resources and family support and things like that we can help and utilize when we're coming, you know, when we have struggles. But there's going to be a lot of times in life where you just got to hold on. You have to push through and have some belief and faith that things are going to get better. Like I said, you'll slowly start building up wins. Things will start to snowball on themselves, and change will come. You know, as long as you get out of your own way, you're not creating more problems. If you can stop the problems you're creating, which again I was creating my own problems for however long. Finally, it took, you know, the threat of imprisonment basically to kind of stop that, and I was kind of coerced into it. But once I got there, I stopped getting in my own way. I stopped giving myself hurdles, and then just kept moving forward. I don't know, like I said, I don't know, maybe because we're in this office, moving forward. You know what I mean?
We're big fans of keep moving forward.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so, but that's honestly what it was. I just had to keep going. Like I said, the hardest part that I could have gone into more detail on with law school was, I mean, I didn't see my wife for like 4 years. You know, I mean, I did the 4-year program because I had to work, and we would laugh. Like I said, we would literally just pass each other at night and say hi before bed, and then she'd leave in the morning. Well, I've still got books laid around me while I'm sleeping, you know, or waking up, but we just kept going. I mean, there at that point in law school, there weren't a lot of wins. I mean, it was just hard. It was just freaking hard, and we just pushed through it. We said, look, let's just keep going. We've got a light at the end of the tunnel. It was definitely added some pressure on me. I said, look, I've got to make this law school thing work. Like I prayed for it, the Lord gave it to me. I got to make it happen now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I got to be successful. But that motivated me, and we just did it. And that's why, like I said, that night when I saw those four little letters in the word pass, I mean, it was just like we had been white knuckling it almost for 4 years, just cleaning offices, and it paid off.
There you go.
So yeah, sometimes, like I said, sometimes you've got tools and you've got things at your disposal. Sometimes you just gotta keep going. Put your head down and keep going.
If there ever was a story for digging in, I think we've got one for the ages today.
Yeah.
So, and then I hate I hate to have to do it, but I do have to give him credit. He's qualified for Boston.
Oh yeah.
He did it before me and you.
By 10 minutes.
I know. Evan's fast.
Another
He's also an endurance runner and one that is very good. And Sean and I hope to be able to catch up to you. I'm working on it. We've been plagued by a couple injuries here, but we're Evan's given us a goal to chase now, so we can.
I'm purposely giving you guys the advantage. You got 6 months. Surgery's Monday. You got about 6 months. And
Yeah.
You're luring us into this
then
false,
you're both behind.
false
That's right.
sense of security.
That's right.
I've been fortunate. Like I said, I haven't had to deal with injuries. Had a great coach. Worked hard. It's been tough, but yeah, that was another rewarding journey. Was running my first marathon back in the fall of 2022, maybe when it was, or 21,
Yeah.
and just. I said working 6 days a week, running every morning, super early in the rain, the cold, and the heat.
Yep.
Working towards that goal and then
Nothing like
achieving
it.
it. Yeah.
It's the best.
Feels good.
Stuff. Well, thanks for
Thanks for the story,
thanks
Evan.
for joining us. That was great.
Yeah, I have a feeling we'll be seeing you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thanks for letting me put it all out there.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah.
Till
Thanks,
next time.
everyone.